But anyway, I want to start by talking about this pedal. This is the Ibanez Tube Screamer. This is my favorite guitar pedal of all time, and this is what he uses as his source of drive. Now, I've had a lot of students get this pedal and think, they're going to pull it out of the box and they're going to sound like Santana or Stevie Ray Vaughan or whoever just by taking it, plugging it into the amp, and then they're gravely disappointed. I really feel like this pedal is meant to be a part of a chain. In order to get that specific sound, it's meant to be run with a compressor. Trey Anastasio, during the time that I was listening to him, used to run it through a Ross compressor, which is a vintage compressor, and that is where he gets his sustain and sort of smooths out the sound of this. He actually uses two tube screamers. He uses a vintage one, and he uses one which is probably similar to this. And like any tube screamer enthusiast, they're modified tube screamers, which means that they maybe have a different chip inside them or whatever. But people, who are really into the tube screamer rarely just pull it out of the box and play it. It's something that really works as part of a chain. Alright, so let's start by talking about modal playing, because that's kind of the context in which most of the big Phish jams occur. Tunes like Run Like an Antelope, that's, I think, like an E minor vamp. The one that we're going to use, though, is Split Open and Melt, which is a C-sharp minor vamp. And so let's just, start by talking about which chord scales we would use right off the bat. Obviously, you'd use your C-sharp minor pentatonic, C-sharp blues. The other two that are pretty obvious are the C-sharp natural minor scale. And your C-sharp Dorian, which is the same as natural minor, except it has a sharp 6 in it. Okay, so I'm just going to play those against the vamp, and then I'll play the scale, and then I'll do a little noodle on it so you can sort of hear it in context. Okay, so let's go one step beyond the chord scale thing for a moment and talk about tensions. I think that one thing that defines Trey's style is that he's really aware of which tensions, meaning non-chord tones, are available on top of the chords that he's playing over. So, obviously you want to know the root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh of the chord. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. But what you want to do is you want to go through the chromatic scale, and you want to look at which notes are available on top of the chord. Now, there are ones to me that seem, frighteningly obvious, that really stand out in terms of a minor 7 chord. The ninth would be a no-brainer for me. I think the 11th is a good one. But I'm just going to do an example where I play some of the tensions and sort of land on them and emphasize them, and I'll try to see if I can label them as I play them. So I'll try to make them really stick out. Okay, so let's talk about the peaks of a Phish jam. Typically what you see is the band start to ascend, what feels like scale-wise or chromatically. Now, I'm going to tell you a very specific technique that I learned from listening to them years ago that sounds complicated, but it's actually very, very simple. And unfortunately, I can't demonstrate it over the loop because it's contingent upon playing with other people that understand the language. But I've created a track to help me demonstrate it for you. Now, the idea is to create a false cadence. Okay, so we're in the key of C sharp. So a cadence that would resolve would obviously be 5 to 1. So G sharp 7 to C sharp minor. Now, in order to make the cadence really strong, we want to imply some kind of altered 5. And we want to do this spontaneously within an improvisation. So what you want to do is play an altered scale off the fifth of the key. We're going to use melodic minor because that's Trey Anastasio's scale of choice when he's executing this particular technique. So we create this altered dominant. I'll explain all this on my blog in more detail, too, in terms of what altered tones are being implied by the scale. So what you want to do in order to do this is you go along, you're playing your vamp, then somehow you want to start dividing phrases up. Like, we're going to use a 16-bar phrase, and I'm going to simulate the band shifting into this altered 5 chord in the second half of the 16-bar phrase, and then you're going to hear it sort of have that ascension, and that feeling where it lifts, and then resolve. And it's very simple. It's very calculated. It's not something that you need to be inspired to do. It's just something that you have to be aware of the language. Alright, so I'm going to describe to you exactly what I'm going to do. In the piano, I'm just keeping like the steady groove, and then when I split the 16 bars in half, I start to ascend, and I'm doing it definitely more in a jazz style, where I'm taking the melodic minor scale and I'm chopping it up into fourths, and I'm sort of like playing around with the shapes of the fourths and ascending through the scale until I reach the top of the phrase. On the bass, I'm playing something that would support it. It's a little bit loose on the bass, but you'll hear what I mean. And then on the guitar, I'm just ascending the scale, not in any particular fashion, but I'm going to try to improvise something that, reaches the top and resolves to C sharp. And then the drums are probably the most important part, because the drums are going to cue you and set up the release. They're going to cue you where the 1 is. So first, what I want you to do is take a listen to the raw vamp that I created and listen to the elements of it, and then I'll try to improvise something over it.